Hello, everybody. This is Tim again, and we're just gluttons for punishment. So we're gonna do another video talking about the Jedi and all our different opinions on that. Um, I don't know who wants to start. Who wants to bitch and or applaud the Jedi first?
No takers there.
Okay, I guess I'll start off then.
Excellent.
I've always we can talk about the prequels versus the episodes 4, 5, and 6. I'm more of a 4, 5, and 6 guy, and I like the sort of open-endedness that the Jedi have. It was in the past, and it really wasn't. There's a lot of openness and vagueness there, and I think that was good because I think if you were going to run a Star Wars game, you'd want to be able to have a little bit more openness and fill in your own details. And then the prequels came, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Alokov, but I think you said the Jedi turned into assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'd go that far, but I don't really understand the whole idea of not marrying, and like you said, sort of breeding the Force sensitivity out of the universe. I didn't really like that too much. I don't know. So that was my opening statement. Who feels like going next?
I'll go for next because you quoted me, so I feel I should defend my position.
Okay.
Support.
That's cool.
Well, actually, I have kind of changed. I mean, I think what they do is terrible in terms of. I think first of all, the breeding for sensitivity out is patently stupid. Second of all, the anti-marriage, anti-attachment thing, and combined with the raising the children raised by automatons thing, and stealing the children from their parents and all that is terrible. But I've gone from thinking they're just like evil to thinking they're tragic because I see the need to do that. I see the need that if you don't train them to use their powers well, they will use their powers unwisely and or even worse, get corrupted by the dark side, and you'll end up with a bunch of Sith. So that seems like it might be necessary, but it's certainly not preferable. And I would compare it to like the Templars from Dragon Age, the Dragon Riders from Inheritance, any magical group that trains people based on just some arbitrary factor that you were picked to have. You have this magical ability, or you were picked by a dragon, or whatever. All of them have good reasons, logical reasons for doing it, but it's still repellent because it still goes against what we would consider moral.
Brady?
Well, I take a much more benevolent stance or reaction to what I think of the Jedi themselves. I don't think it's as malevolent or some sort of dark purpose. I use dark in the sense, not
yeah, because I
side.
actually see it as a noble purpose in that they're doing something to protect the universe from these untrained, unsupervised Force users. But and you could even say it's benevolent towards the universe, but it's still, there are problems with it.
Yeah, and specifically, I don't have what I was going to say with the specific example that you mentioned was the search for the seeking out the Force sensitive youths and bringing them back to the temple in Coruscant for training. I see that as an honor. Whatever individually and emotionally that is, the separation from the parents or parent and the original native environment, wherever they happen to be in the galaxy. I see it as an honor to be, I guess, not so much chosen as found at that point and then taken back. And I think that's a great responsibility that someone grows to in time. I know as a kid I saw the what is now episode 4 in 1977 when it was released, so I was 7 years old at the time, and that may be too old in the canon of Star Wars to be found or trained as a Jedi, but I would have, in my imagination after seeing the first film, episode 4, I would have thought, oh, that would have been a great honor to be chosen. I still remember thinking that as a kid. So that sort of informs my where I start on my perceptions of the Jedi.
I guess. Well, I guess my thoughts on that would be like, kind of like in the Middle Ages, maybe like a poor family, you know, they giving their son up for, you know, a religious order, you know, like to be a monk perhaps, or to be raised by monks. And for that child, that would actually be better for that child than living back in poverty. Of course, they would have to, or they would be sort of inclined to take those oaths when they got older, but that might not necessarily be the case. So I don't know, if the Jedi Order comes down and, you know, wants to take one of my kids, because they're force sensitive, I don't know, that almost seems cruel to me. I understand why they're doing it, but from the parents and the
fathers,
I was saying.
I understand it as a necessity, but it's cruel.
Unless like Brady's saying, where the family is, you know, I don't know if you can be devout with the Force, but if they believe in the Force, and they might view that as an honor, you know, like you're saying, like our son is maybe one day be a Jedi, so maybe down at the local pub on, you know, Zelon 9 or whatever planet they live on, they can be bragging to everybody else and all the strange, freakish races that are living there about how their son's going to be a Jedi someday. So I don't know.
Yeah, that would work, except it is. I'm pretty sure in the canon of Star Wars, if the child is old enough to want it, they're too old to be trained. You have to get them before they have any preconceptions, and have been tainted, as it were, by normal family. So they have to be taken before they can understand the honor and be excited about it, which seems like they're taking the choice away from the child. You're forcing this on them.
Well, I agree up till the last couple words there. I mentioned this in one of my back and forth conversations with Chris Bolterange, the Jesuit saying, where give me a child. What is it? Give me a child up to 7 years, and I'll make the man. So their idea is, you know, the first 7 years of the formative years, there's not, as Alex just said, the understanding or the conscious effort of willpower to want to be a Jedi. That is then going to be just their environment, their person is the fact that they're going to be Jedi. If you get them that early, you create the man, as it were, with the Jesuit saying. I do not see it with the last words there. I don't see it as a cruel thing, even though, as Tim mentioned, even though I'm a parent myself, putting myself in that position, I think it would have been an honor. I'm not speaking for my daughter here, but as a parent, I think if I were in that setting, that galaxy at that time, long ago, I would be, I would consider it an honor. Having said that, my daughter is chosen in this example. Having said that, I can also see the people that in the Star Wars setting, in that canon, that don't trust, actively or passively the Republic itself. Therefore, they may not like actively or passively the Jedi Order either. I can see that perspective. I don't have that myself, but then again, I don't live there.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about what a trauma it would be for the kid, as well, like to be taken away from their parents. Because look at the Tombs of Atuan, the Earthsea book. The priestess, and that was taken like when she was 7 or 6, whatever, or really young, and had like nightmares and was all screwed up. And eventually, she did become a priest of that temple or whatever it was. But that was still a cruel act. It doesn't matter that she eventually grew into accept that role. It was still cruel.
Well, and the main protagonist in that example, in the Earthsea trilogy, Sparrowhawk, Ged, also has a similar background, though it's much more initially positive.
He was initially chose, like, he desperately wanted to be a wizard from the beginning. He wasn't just like, I will train you. He went to the wise woman, he wanted to be trained, and then he went to Ogion, and then he went to the wizard school. So at every step of the way, he chose to do that.
What I think's interesting about this is that, do the Jedi do good things? I think the overall opinion would be yes. Maybe some of the ways they go about doing something, their traditions, you might have problems with certain traditions that they hold to. I don't know. I could see someone, like you're saying, holding a grudge against them after being selected as a Force-sensitive person, taking away from their parents, and that being sort of like an issue that they have. But in time, they might realize that, well, okay, I'm doing some good things here. I understand why they do it, and sort of move on from there without being horribly just, having all these mental trauma scars or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why I said they're tragic, they're not evil. They're doing it for a good reason, but it's still in itself an evil and cruel act.
All right, well, so...
But I don't think, sorry, Tim, on that point, I don't see it, and I'd argue, I don't see it as an evil or cruel act to do that. It is opportunity. And in some ways, it could be seen as, from my perspective, as responsibility. As we mentioned before, we recorded, Alex mentioned the Shaolin. They did a similar thing with the Shaolin monastery of bringing these kids in, and it was seen as, with the Chinese people, which I know is different culturally, and I sort of relate a lot to that. Personally, but it was seen as a great honor and a great responsibility that their child go there. If we equate that, as Lucas sort of based it on, in part at least, on Shaolin, then we also, and there's also Wudan in China as well, you could mention, but if they based it on that, Lucas based it on that, then you can also read in the honor, the privilege, the great pride and responsibility socially that a lot of people. Now, obviously, you're going to have individual, like Anakin's example of.
But that was because he was taken too late.
Right.
That's true.
That's why they wanted to take them early.
All right, so maybe so they could start him off. I guess they wanted to prevent him from being evil, right? Isn't that what they decided?
Well, they wanted. They thought that he would fall in because he was too old. So they didn't want to train him so that he would be even more powerful when he did fall. It's mitigating the evil. Yes, he's Force sensitive. We can't change that. But if we train him, we'll only give him more power for when he eventually does fall to the dark side.
Now, wait. According to the book, I'm wondering if you're making a presumption there. According to the film, The Phantom Menace, and the book, The Phantom Menace, that I've read, which I thought was actually really good.
Yeah, me too.
I'm trying to remember who the author was. Was that
Terry Brooks was.
Thank you, Terry Brooks. Yeah, I like him. Did Yoda, the primary characters of not wanting to admit Anakin as a Padawan, did they actually foresee necessarily and precisely an evil path to the dark side, or just the possibility that he could go over to the dark side, or there'd be major complications in his training? I'm wondering which side of that.
They foresaw a great possibility, a great precipice, by which they said they saw that he was full of darkness, and that there was a great chance that he would fall to the dark side. It was, if not certain, at least very, very likely.
Well, do we want to talk about the no marriage thing?
Okay. Again, I see with the don't get attached thing. But I would say it's you could avoid attachment in that sense without outright forbidding marriage. You can say, okay, you can marry, you can fall in love, but you cannot have. You just have to accept that you're going to be away from your family, and you're going to. I think because you can't prevent people from falling in love. No matter how much you train them, you can train them to try and ignore it, but that just causes guilt. It seems it would be better just to say, okay, which is what happened in the New Jedi Order. Okay, you can marry, but don't let yourself, just like they don't forbid them to have friends, and you can get just as attached to a friend as to a a person you're married to or a child or whatever, but don't let your grief when they die or your fear at them being threatened drive you to the dark side, which if you've trained them well enough, they will know how to control those emotions and keep them from causing harm. It seems more prudent to get them to allow them love, but control their anger, rather than say, no, control your love, the fact that you've fallen in love with this person.
So is the goal then, I guess, like what's the ideal is that the Jedi is supposed to be honorable, and to be honor is almost supposed to be his wife. You know, that is the thing. Because if you have a wife, there are times when you will have to make a decision, like we were talking about before. Do I go rescue my wife, or do I do things with my wife, or do I do the honorable thing and, you know, serve my order and do the things that the Jedi want me to do?
And that is where I was saying that instead of meant the conflict by saying that you can't have a wife, they should train them that you can have a wife, but when this situation comes up, you train them to choose the honorable choice.
Oh, see now, God, I disagree with all that actually in the context here of the Jedi.
That's why we're having this discussion. So
yeah, I know, and maybe because I have been married and divorced now, that sort of leads to the idea. Not that I wish I, never have done. That's not the case, but I can see a problem with responsibility, as Tim was alluding to, or as I took from his, and why I interjected there with it, or game, the type of thing where, Tim and I have talked about where we should be tidying up, cleaning the house and whatever, and we're on YouTube watching a gaming poster or preparing for a game itself, or, whatever it is, just reading a gaming book. And I think that is a distraction to the wife issue, or the marriage issue is a distraction. And bigger than that, I think it's also, and in context of Jedi, I think, marriage is a great thing or whatever in real life. Jedi, I see it as being a hindrance in many ways, and I don't see the definition of love as necessitating the sort of romantic, interpersonal marriage level. So
you're talking about just the various degrees of love, or the different types of love?
Right, like the cliche or the funny thing to say is "I love you, man," that type of thing. I can see the friendly, the platonic, as it were, sort of level of love, the appreciation, the empathy, as Alex said earlier. I think on that level, I think, the way Anakin is said in, what is it, episode 2, that we're encouraged to love. I can see as the definition.
Yeah, I was just taking it as, well, the same thing is true of people in the military, and they are allowed to marry.
Oh, no, and I thought of that as you said it, the military, where if they've got their orders to ship out, they do it. They do it. That's what their job is to do. I took it that way as well. I just think in this case, it's a lot more extreme, almost like it's not quite a military like we would think of. It's what the cleric sort of is in Dungeons and Dragons, a militaristic religious order. So militaristic in that the Jedi are supposedly peacekeepers. So
I don't see. I mean, not obviously some priesthoods, some religious orders are celibate, but not all of them are.
No.
So I don't see, even if you think of them as a religious order and a militaristic religious order, well, the people in the military can marry, people in many religious orders can marry. What's the problem?
Well, yeah, and then in the real world, I can see, like, Church of England, the priests can marry, or the Lutherans, or a lot of the Protestant groups. In the Catholic community, the priest cannot marry. And I can see that point of view as well, though, infamously, we've seen it to be a problem in a minority of Catholic priests. But
yeah,
that's not a problem of the religion, that's a problem of personal psychological disorder that, you know, on a scale that's unfortunate. But in the Jedi sense, it's so much more an Eastern a base or influence to creating that in Lucas's world, that I see it more as a contemplative monk type situation, even if it's martial in its way, than equating it to some sort of Western religion at all. It sort of always falls short of the Western religion, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely more Eastern, but
well, I would say it's more Eastern, but it's taking some of that, you know, like can't marry, sort of Catholic priest sort of vibe to it. You know, I can never say the word asceticism, ascetic.
Asceticism is
asceticism,
how I pronounce
okay.
it. Yeah.
Like a Hindu man doesn't eat, or you know, just depends entirely on you know, donations, or the temples that rely totally on donations from people. Then they don't actually do anything towards their own personal physical world. I know the Jedi are not quite like that, but...
Well, you say that, but many, although the Buddhist monks are celibate on the whole and don't marry, a lot of them have, somewhat like some of the Catholic monasteries do, they produce their own food, their own
that's true.
beer, their own rice wine, their own, you know, they do have a function in the community at large, sort of economically or subsistence-wise.
Yeah, but I think the difference with the Jedi is they're going around encountering people that any of whom they could fall in love with. It works for the monks because the monks stay in their monastery and don't encounter anyone that they could fall in love with. Except other monks, and the other monks are as committed to it as they are. But I think it would cause more distraction to fall in love with someone that you meet and have to leave them and be all torn up about that than to marry them and sort of get that resolution, get that closure, and just know that you have to still do your duty anyway. I mean, you're still going to have anxiety over what's going to happen to them and all that, but I think it's no more likely to harm your performance as a Jedi than it would your performance as a cop or a soldier. And in fact, it'll harm it less than the guilt and the being torn up over having to reject or hide the fact that you're in love.
I think what's interesting about the Jedi is it's a mix of a religious order and a mix of sort of a military, you know, like just like a militant religious order, I guess. And
yeah. Like I think
what parts are religion and what parts are military.
To show and to not have to hide his love, it would have worked. He would have been able to be saved. I mean, he still would have had to struggle, but I think if he had the support of the other Jedi, because he was open about it, or he was allowed to be open about it, rather than having to hide it from them and thus feeling alone and feeling like he was the only one who could do anything. And Palpatine was the only one who understood or whatever.
Well, understood that Palpatine's playing a pawn.
Right, but Anakin thought he wasn't. He was taken in because Palpatine was the only one who showed kindness.
I'm not sure that's showing kindness.
I don't know about that.
It was to him.
Well, that's how it was read. It's not. I don't think that was the intent of Palpatine or Sidious.
I know it wasn't, because he's a Sith.
Yeah, but I don't think Anakin's a very good example of that. I think he's sort of outside the bubble. To use him as an example of is.
What about Obi-Wan Kenobi? Why don't you talk about him as an
expanded
example?
universe, Obi-Wan in one of the books meets his mother and has the same thing, where he gets torn in two about it because he's finally met his mother and all that trauma comes back, and he does eventually suppress it, but it's still trauma.
Well, I don't think he suppresses it. I think he actually, like his, and I forget which Padawan he actually kind of thinks is hot, as it were, Obi-Wan. In his training, when he's the Padawan of Qui-Gon, there is another Padawan, a female Padawan that he's, you know, kind of got the hots for. I don't think he suppresses that. I think he comes to terms with that and the instance with his mother as well. I think that's a very different example than Anakin's unresolved. Anakin tries to suppress it, which is, if you try to suppress anything, you're automatically not understanding.
And that's how I took the thing, though. It's that they're trying to suppress love and destroy and just prevent themselves from having to deal with that problem by suppressing it.
Oh, see, I don't see it as an issue of suppression. I think it's an understanding of what love actually is, and that's why I mentioned the Platonic ideal, which I think is an ideal because, again, as Cary Grant says, a cliche is a cliche because it's true. The ideal is there because it can be true. It can be attained.
Yeah, well, you can have platonic love, but that isn't a substitute for romantic love. If you fall in love romantically with someone, platonic love a platonic relationship with them or with someone else isn't going to fix that issue.
Well, I think, but romantic or sexual love is not even on the table for most Jedi. It's not something that they would consider as a real opportunity, a real...
It's not something they would consider acceptable, but it's an urge they still have. They can still fall in love.
Maybe some, but I think in general the training is that's not even there. It's not even a concept for them.
See, I think part of that is that I can understand this is being more of the religious thing where they believe that it's just not for them, that they have a different place or different role in the world and they should focus on other things. And
yeah, but religious people too, they may have that. That's what I was drawing from. They may have that belief, but it doesn't prevent them from falling in love, and therefore they have to struggle.
Well, yeah,
they do have to uphold their belief, but it's still a struggle because they do have to struggle.
They do have to struggle, but that's part of any religious person's life. There are struggles, there are temptations, there are things that they must resist. If they're going to follow, the quote unquote true path.
Right, and that's why I was just saying I think it would be less of a struggle if they were allowed to marry, but then accept that that did not supersede their duties.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, my own personal beliefs, I think that pastors or whatever should be allowed to marry, but this is just more of us talking about the Jedi, I guess.
Yeah, I know, and that's my problem with the Jedi because I hold that position with religious orders, and they kind of are one.
See, I divide the two. I sort of I see it in the real world, and I do wish Catholic priests had the opportunity to, if they so wish, to marry, just like anybody else. Like a lay person in that context doesn't have to marry if they don't want to, or doesn't even have to find the opposite sex or same sex or anybody attractive in a romantic sexual way if they so choose. But the Jedi, I really think, because it's more of a well, my gosh, I'll get in trouble for saying more, but it's a because with the issue of the Force, with Force sensitivity, with what the Force is in its entirety, I think that is. I won't say the lover in this case, though you could use that as an analogy, but that's your true companion's not the right word either, but that's your sustenance, or it's a give and take. It's symbiotic, as it's said. I don't see any problem with the original Jedi Order with their celibacy and non-marriage.
To take it outside Star Wars or something similar, Wheel of Time has that too with the magic. That is kind of Force-like with yin and yang, but even the magicians there, they do find sort of that to be a companion, but it doesn't eliminate their wish to have a mortal companion, and that's why they have warders, which are like bodyguards that they bind and basically become unofficial husbands.
Well, and that stems from the esoteric reading of, in part, the esoteric reading of the Judeo-Christian Bible in the instances, famously 2 instances with Samson, and with Solomon, where they failed magically or supernaturally because they sort of succumbed to the carnal, romantic, sexual side of their nature instead of focusing more on their...
Yeah, but at least in Middle of Time, it doesn't hamper. I mean, some of them can be hampered, but like 99% of the Aes Sedai have warders, and maybe 1% of them that have warders get, like, it damages their ability to do their job or whatever. Some of them even marry, and it still just isn't a problem.
All right, well, we're talking a lot about this stuff. What about offspring produced from, couplings, I guess, and how that's frowned upon as well? Because I could be wrong, but it seems like force sensitivity is passed through generation, like Luke and Leia are, Anakin, Darth Vader's children, and they have the strong force powers because of that. Or is that the only way that they get force, or can you just spontaneously get it just because? It seems like, I don't know, they're not real clear on that.
They're not.
It's kind of open-ended.
Probably both. I think they're not clear, but I'm just sort of thinking randomly that it's a matter like magic in Harry Potter, where two wizards who breed are more likely to produce magical offspring, but any pairing can produce magical offspring.
Okay, because I was kind of thinking that it was only through heredity that you have these. Maybe it skips a few generations sometimes, but that's the main way that you get force sensitivity. So in my mind, I thought when, because they disallow marriage and disallow Jedis to have children, that they're kind of, I guess they're not breeding, force sensitive children into the universe. So it's kind of dwindling the amount of force users that are out there. And we talked a little bit about maybe that's because they want to control things. They want to reduce the amount of people that have force abilities. But again, this is stuff that's not talked about, so it's just the way I took it.
Yeah, I thought that if you wanted to take that view is certainly supported. Also, you could just say, well, they wouldn't be that stupid, so it must be possible to not to get it through not through inheriting it, just through spontaneously getting it. But even then, there must be fewer people who get it spontaneously than there are people who are born with it. So, so it still seems unintelligent to breed it out of existence. Even if you wouldn't completely breed it out of existence, you'd still dramatically reduce the number of people who had it.
What do you think, Brady?
What I was going to say, and I hinted at it earlier, is what if it's not the case of assuming it's breeding it out of existence by not allowing Jedi to breed, to conceive, produce offspring. But there's actually, I don't know this, but letting imaginations roam, what if it's actually a problem with two force-sensitive people conceiving a sort of, like, going back to a biblical reference, a Nephilim-like abomination, as it was seen. Whether they were or not, I don't know, actually, the Nephilim, but they were perceived as being an abomination of existence. You know what I mean? What if in that context of the Jedi, what if you create something so powerful and out of control, psychotic, etc., that it's just to, for example,
Yeah, that's how Werewolf the Forsaken deals with it. Even though werewolfism is mostly inherited, although there are spontaneous ones, they're not allowed to breed with each other because they will produce this crazy evil spirit that destroys the spirit world and kills werewolves. And
I thought that's how metas were produced.
That's why I said Werewolf the Forsaken.
Oh, Forsaken. Okay, my bad.
Apocalypse metas are fine. They're frowned upon because they're looked on as bastards or as like half-breeds.
Yeah, I think they're not fertile.
They're really true-bred, but they're looked on as deformed. But the Forsaken version of metas is they're an evil spirit that hates Aratha and kills everything.
All right, so Brady, you're saying that maybe this is again a benevolent thing where they're trying to prevent, like maybe there's a small chance of some horrible abomination being born. Maybe there's some prophecy, it was way back when, where they're like, if two Jedis produce an offspring, there's a chance that something horrible is going to happen. and maybe that's why.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that. When I started thinking about the Jedi Order in context of all of the sort of feedback I was getting from players of how my druids in my game, which are, I use the phrase druid-heavy Dungeons & Dragons game, the Druid Order has been compared in some ways, not all, but some ways, to the Jedi Order. When you get, in my game, when you get to... I started thinking about the Jedi, and I thought, well, that could be the case, because the druids in my game, when they marry within, which they can be allowed to do, the offspring often don't last very long, because in the game they are so tied to the fabric, I guess, which is my version of the Force, is they're so tied to it, they transcend, the offspring transcend into the fabric as an adolescent. Their physical existence just evaporates. So it doesn't last very long, and I sort of, imaginatively thought of, we don't know this with Lucas, with Star Wars, but I sort of applied that to the Jedi Order and thought, well, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you get an Anakin Skywalker, which that's not how he's conceived apparently, but maybe you could get that, where you get this, Ubersturm, this super strong storm that just cannot be controlled, and I don't mean controlled by the Jedi Order as has been said, but on the evil side of the perception, but the controlled within that own person, that one being. They can't even control their powers. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but that would be interesting. And I don't know the vast canon of Star Wars to know all the hundreds of books that have been written, novels or whatever. All that material, if that ever happened, odds are it did.
Well, maybe we should come up with what we would think. What would you like to change? If, let's say, you're going to run a Star Wars game, how would you change the Jedi Order, or would you? Maybe we'll let Alokov start first. What would your version of the Jedi Order look like, and what would some of their traditions be?
The new Jedi Order. Pretty much, they did everything that because Luke had none of the dogmatic crap that the other Jedi had, so he...
And this is from the Expanded Universe, is that right? The Expanded Universe book?
Yeah, that's the Timothy Zahn version.
Okay.
He was fine with you can marry, you can be trained later in life, all this stuff, and he turned out, his order turned out fine. So.
Okay.
And to me, I think again, you could say you're training them so you're giving them more power, or you could say, even if they fall, at least we will understand that there's a risk. We will see the risk coming, and therefore we can deal with them, as opposed to just, oh crap, some guy who was trained by some Sith we didn't know about showed up, and we could have trained him, and we could have controlled him, but he's now killing us.
Brady, would you do anything different with the Jedi Order, or would you leave them alone?
Go.
Because you seem to like how they're set up, so that's why I'm asking that.
Yeah, I know. In all seriousness, I would leave it as is. If I were running a Star Wars game, which I've not done, but if I were running it, I would probably leave it as the influences, the real world influences that have. I would focus on those, and I don't see a sense of the idea that they're reactionary in it. In that.
I don't think all Jedi are. I think they certainly weren't to begin with. I think by the time of the prequels, they have become reactionary.
I think they've become complacent, and I think that can breed reactionism. But I don't know if.
Yeah, I think they are reactionary because they are afraid of new things. They are afraid of losing their position.
And I think
like the Roman Empire got, where when they got complacent, they also became reactionary.
Yes, they did. I think that's a pitfall. but I don't think in general, I don't think that they're actually trying to train Force sensitives so that they don't succumb to the dark side. I think they're trying to train Force sensitives, as I said, because it's their responsibility to do so. They don't, imagine these, like the stereotypical sorcerer in Dungeons and Dragons, where it goes to sort of a untrained. There's kind of a what am I trying to say? There's a poltergeist effect to their powers. They don't know how to control it, so it's coming out as these things emanating, and
it's uncontrollable. Is what you're saying, right?
And that's exactly why I was saying they do it to control them, not out of a malicious way, but out of a benevolent. We want to save the world from the menace that this person could be if not trained properly. Which is what they do in Wheel of Time, too. They go out and seek these people because either they're going to die, they're going to burn out their ability to use magic at all, or they're going to do something crazy.
Well, and I don't even see it as that. I think that's a bit extreme, maybe, from my point of view. But I think just the confusion, the internal dilemma or dichotomy of you think you're a normal person, but these things are going on around you. They just don't want that sort of seemingly psychotic behavior or, existential issue with these people. They don't want that to go on, so it's their responsibility to go out and find them and bring them into the fold so that they can get to their realize their potential and realize their role in the greater universe as well. That's the way I see it. I mean, rose-colored glasses may be for me, but that's how I look at it.
All right. Well, I think I'll just from my perspective, I think if I ever ran a Star Wars game, I would allow Jedi to marry, have children, perhaps even have those children go to learn to be Jedi too. So that doesn't really bother. Well, that's how I would do it. I think if I ever ran a game, I think that's pretty much. We're over 40 minutes already, so.
Oh wow!
I think that's a good place to start. And basically, we just I don't know if we had any consensus here. We just threw some ideas around. So I guess
we do.
I guess
we do have consensus because you pretty much convinced me they aren't assholes. So
so now we do have more of a consensus. Okay.
Yeah, I do like them. I don't know how to play one, but I like them, sort of.
So any viewers that are watching this, if you have any opinions on the Jedi Order and how you would improve them, just leave those below. And thanks for watching.